Everybody joining me on the phone right now is Brent Sobleski, Bleacher Report NFL analyst. And Brent, it's always good to have you on the show. I appreciate you taking the time.
No, thank you for having me. We're hitting that midway point of the season for the NFL, a little further along in college football. A lot of interesting things happening, my friend, good and bad at both levels. So I think we have plenty to talk about and try to cram in here in the next few minutes.
Yeah, I was telling somebody the other day, it's like the NFL just hit the halfway point. So it feels like there's just plenty more football to be played. But when you look at the college side, I mean, it's 3 weeks until championship Saturday, where all the conference championship games. So it's like that part really flies by. And you really just see where the NFL is, that grind. You can especially see that for the players, but it's just kind of funny how it just feels. We're almost done with college, but NFL still has a long way to go.
Well, you got that lull, right? Mm-hmm. So college technically starts, about 2 weeks before the NFL. NFL is now 17 weeks, 18 with the bye weeks, and you get that. It's not a full month anymore like it used to be in college between the end of the regular season, conference championships, and bowl games. Now you have those earlier bowl games, but still, the way the schedule works out, so I always found it kind of funny. And to be quite frank with you, there's certain times that I love that it's set up that way. And I'll give you an example because I was just talking to my editor with it yesterday. We had been talking about NFL draft prospects at the FCS level, right? Mm-hmm. And that lull between the end of the conference season and the bowl season, I love that time because that's when you start getting the FCS playoffs and you start getting to watch teams and prospects that you normally wouldn't or aren't usually on TV. So it doesn't matter when you're watching, what time you're watching, you can always find good quality football and how it pertains to not only college football, but eventually the NFL.
Yeah, and FCS has this odd concept. They let more than 4 teams into their playoff.
Blasphemy. Aren't you in the South? You're not allowed saying them things.
Well, it is what it is. I've kind of made my point on that. My whole piece on that was you had 5 power conferences that set up a playoff where only 4 teams could get in. I mean, did y'all not do math? Did y'all? I mean, I get I'm from the South, SEC wise, but did the other conferences? Did you not how to do math in that situation?
Well, that was the point I was trying to make. Is the SEC is one of those strongholds that doesn't necessarily want to expand, or they're trying to find obstacles to place in the way, which is understandable because they're in there every year. Sometimes it's 2 teams. It's the other conferences that are losing out. Hence why, in my opinion, the most logical setup would be 8 teams. Your 5 Power 5 conference winners, your top group of 5 ranked team, and then 2 wild cards, and then everyone that earned the opportunity to get in does, and then you settle out on the field. And to me, that's the most basic and best overall way to approach the situation. But what do I know? I'm not making millions and billions of dollars in college football in the bowl system.
Yeah, there you go. That's what it's all about with there. And so I could do a whole podcast on just that topic. But,
Sorry, I got you on a tangent.
Yeah, you got to watch that stuff. I'll start going all over the place on that topic. We look at, before we jump into, really NFL draft class and quarterbacks, and that's kind of like the position I always look at. And, you see everywhere, and, a lot of people say this is not a great class that we will have for the 2022 quarterback draft class. So where are you at on these guys that we're going to see in the, playing this year? Obviously, they're trying to up their draft stock. Guys like, and I see on y'all's mock draft from last week, y'all posted on Bleacher Report, Desmond Ritter, Malik Willis, Kenny Pickett, you got Sam Howell, a lot of people like Matt Corral. Where are you? Is this a bad quarterback class, or what's your thoughts on them?
Well, let me frame it this way. This is what, our 3rd or 4th year we've had these discussions, Phillip, since we started doing the podcast at times together and discussing the NFL draft, right? Mm-hmm. This is easily the worst quarterback class I've seen in that time. So if that gives you any indication, I will also be very upfront with you when it came to writing the most recent mock draft for Bleacher Report. We, as the scouting department, as the group, built in the fact that teams are going to reach for quarterbacks. We don't believe there's 4 first-round quarterbacks. In fact, in our initial top 100 prospects, which will be changing soon here in the next couple of weeks, we'll start putting out our top 150 to 175. We have 1 quarterback even in the first round. So, and when you look at some of the performances we saw just this past weekend, specifically Malik Willis and how he played against the Ole Miss Rebels, it's hard to even rationalize continually putting guys into that range, even though we know that some teams probably going to pull the trigger sooner rather than later. It just depends on how early in the process that's going to happen.
And, you to bring up Malik Willis, and I was looking forward to that game because you look at those are two guys that we do hear talked about, Malik Willis and Matt Corral, and I mean his offensive line didn't do him any help. But what is it though from you, and then what you think for a lot of people are seeing out of Malik Willis? Because look, as a guy that I write for Auburn on last word college football, I remember seeing at Auburn. I said, well, he's a good read option quarterback. He's a good runner. I mean, what has he done probably in your mind from what you've seen to up that stock where people may be thinking about him as a first round draft pick or just, a draft pick at all?
I think the best way to frame it with him and the conversation, at least making the case for him, is he's a first round athlete, but he's probably a mid to late round quarterback, if that makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. Playing the position. And it's not entirely his fault. Well, Hugh Freeze, we know, doesn't exactly run an NFL style scheme, or he's not asked to make the type of throws that a lot of you, or at least what you would like to see from quarterback prospects, right? And when he tries to make those throws, and you can give examples, 3 really atrocious examples from that Ole Miss contest. He threw 3 interceptions. I'm not going to put the first one on him because it was essentially a 50-50 ball that his receiver lost, and it rolled into the defender's hands. But when you look at it beyond that point, he tried to take a whole shot against cover 2. It was terrible. They tried to fake it with a smoke route. He went to the over-top route. The safety was literally waiting there for the pass. So that's a poor decision. There was later in the third quarter, I believe, he tried to throw a screen, completely missed. The running back overthrew him. It fell into the linebacker's arms. He dropped that one, so that was fortunate for Liberty at the time. And then finally, with the game on the line, and with a minute left, albeit down 2 scores, I fully understand that. But on first down, not third, not fourth, on first down, he missed his first read, didn't pull the trigger, rolled to his right, threw off balance, and threw into the end zone where 3 defenders were standing. Not a receiver, 3 defenders. These are just decisions you cannot make to be considered an elite quarterback prospect.
Kind of for move off this topic in that game too, Matt Corral. I mean, obviously you guys don't have him in the first round, but you see him in other places. What's been your read on him?
Well, and I'll tell you this directly, a little behind the scenes. Our scout who goes through the quarterbacks even told us this week that he's likely going to start knocking these quarterbacks down because there's even less to him than what he initially thought. And Matt Corral is a great example. Look, I just mentioned Malik Willis, and what I saw just this past weekend in the tape that will be the most dissected by NFL scouts. Well, with Matt Corral, it's different. He's a good quarterback, and he does exactly what's needed of him within that Ole Miss scheme. But much like Hugh Freeze's system, you're scheming it up to a way that makes it easy on the quarterback, right? You're not sitting there and you're not making the types of reads and plays that you necessarily need at the NFL level. But I liken it to, and I made this comparison, offhanded comparison. I won't say it's a straight comparison because there's obviously differences, to Jimmy Garoppolo coming out of Eastern Illinois, right? Quick release, similar slight build, but at the same time, highly productive because they're in an offensive scheme that allows them to be, even though it's overly simplistic. So when you take all that into consideration, whether it's the 6'2", hovering around 200-pound frame, coupled with what's asked of him within Ole Miss's system, that's really what kind of pushes him into that second round instead of being QB1. And really, QB1's totally up for grabs. In our opinion, we've been siding with Desmond Ritter from Cincinnati, and the reason I bring him up is because he's the best combination of athlete and pocket passer that is available. Now, would you rather go with a more traditional quarterback like Kenny Pickett? That's totally understandable, but also take into account that I liken him to this year's Mac Jones, right? There's nothing truly special about him from a traits perspective, but he just knows how to play the position. But also take into account this. Pickett will be 24 years old before he ever takes a snap in the NFL. So all these things have to be weighed into the conversation. It kind of lends you to believing that if this is the year you need a quarterback, it's not the best. And that's unfortunate for a lot of teams.
Well, Kenny Pickett's a 10th-year senior there at Pitt, so,
Look, he is very good. I personally, I would put him QB1 because I think he's a guy like Mac Jones. You can just, he's a cog in the machine. Put him in a team that's already, relatively successful, that has an established system, an established coaching stuff, and he's going to execute, right? That's Mac Jones. That's exactly what's happening with him in the New England Patriots. But if you're expecting him to come in as QB1 and elevate your team and be, a high first-round pick, you're going to be sorely mistaken because he's not that type of quarterback.
Yeah, so and I just as just a side note, there's guys like him all the time where you look out and said, "How long has he been in college?" Okay, but
and that's another question, right? Year 6, first year big time production, right? So same system all these years, high comfort level. He knows what he's doing. He's older than everyone, more mature. And you have to consider these things, I mean, I'm not saying he's Brandon Weeden, but he's certainly older than what you would typically get, especially if you look at this year's past draft class when you had Trevor Lawrence and you had Justin Fields and you had Trey Lance and Zach Wilson, all who were 20 to 21 years old when they came into the league.
Yeah, absolutely. So transitioning into some stuff that's happened this Sunday, I want to start with the Bengals and the Browns. And I was looking forward to this game, Brent. I was thinking this is going to be a pretty good game between two teams from Ohio. And Bengals come out that first possession, they look really good. They moved down the field, the pick six. It felt like at that moment, I mean, I know the Bengals also, made some plays. I mean, you don't lose a game without one play, but the Browns just took that game. And then it looked like a team that just had a week and they needed to and they played well. I mean, with some distractions. Just what was your big takeaway from the Browns? I mean, the impressive performance they had, because we talked after week 1 and we talked how good this team could be. I know they have some injury issues. Now they're going at 5-4. What's your feeling on this Browns team now?
Well, it's a game they needed, and it wasn't needed because of the record. It wasn't needed because they're getting healthier, though there's still plenty of issues around this team even as of now. You have Nick Chubb and the COVID protocols, which could prevent him from not playing this weekend. So there's obstacles, right?
Yeah.
But you mentioned the drama off the field, and this team rallied around the fact that their quarterback was essentially publicly lambasted by their star wide receiver or vis-a-vis his father, and even to a lesser extent, LeBron freaking James, right?
Yeah.
And anyone who's watched Cleveland Browns with critical thinking over the last year plus has seen that for whatever reason, and I'm not going to lay blame at anyone's feet, but for whatever reason, Odell Beckham Jr. did not work in Cleveland. When he was on the field, they were a worse offense. So it was important for them to go out and prove that they didn't need him, that releasing him was the best move for the team and the individual. And I think that's what they did, because we heard the narrative all week. Odell Beckham's not there because Baker Mayfield's fault, blah, blah, blah. Well, he showed how good of a quarterback he can be. He doesn't have to be the guy that carries the entire offense, nor do they ask him to be. They just need him to be efficient within the scheme and orchestrate the offense. And that's exactly what he did. They looked great on that end. It was their most complete team effort. Now let's see if they can stay healthy, because they have a huge game against the New England Patriots this coming weekend where both teams are 5-4. And if they want to have legitimate playoff hopes, you have to win this contest.
And just think about Odell Beckham. Look, a talent, and we know somebody's going to sign him. He's going to be on a roster more likely somewhere. But just the way I look, and I would love to get your take on this at football. When you have to, as an offense, I believe if you have to worry about so much about making a guy happy, getting him the ball so many times, I don't see an offense being able to flow that way. Where it's just at best when you got a guy, yes, he's super talented at position, but he understands his role in the offense. If he gets open, he's going to get the ball. They're not going to go out of their way just to make him happy, because then I feel like the offense just can't flow that way.
There was a video going around from NFL Films. I'm not sure if you saw it on social media, Phillip, but it was Odell Beckham on the sideline with Nick Chubb, right? And it's just a small capture. But what was said at the time was Odell looked at Nick and stated, "I just want to score a touchdown." Nick Chubb just sitting down on the bench, resting, looked up at the wide receiver and says, "I just want to win." And if that doesn't encapsulate those two individuals any more than they possibly can, I don't know what would. And that's the thing, right, with Odell Beckham Jr. We understand he's uber talented, and that when he's fully healthy, he can be as good as anyone in the NFL. But there's also a selfishness within his game, within him as an individual, that has creeped up and kind of exploded out onto the scene eventually in both New York and Cleveland now. So when you have these reports coming out where he wants to go to a winning culture and where he can be productive, to me, it's not about the winning culture, because Cleveland's now got a winning record.
Mm-hmm.
They just came off the playoffs with a win, even though he wasn't in the lineup. And yet the reports are he wants to go to teams like Seattle, San Francisco, New Orleans. You know, those teams don't have winning records. New Orleans does, but they don't have a starting quarterback at the moment, really, unless you consider Trevor Siemian of starting caliber, which most wouldn't. So to me, once you have those reports come out simultaneously, or at least on the same day, it tells you all you need to know about the situation and how he wants to be treated. Again, that's fine. We've had diva receivers in the NFL for decades, but you got to know how to work with them. And obviously it didn't work in Cleveland, where the system's bigger than the individuals.
Last thing get to point on is a quarterback that made his debut. Of course, that was Jordan Love for the Packers. And I just view this, I think you got to be impressed, actually, because they only lost 13-7 to the Chiefs. You put Aaron Rodgers in there, they probably win that game. And I know a lot of people, people want to get on Twitter and be, it's time for, he's not good. I say, well, that's unfair after one start, and put it in the situation he was put in, and the Chiefs blitzing him like they did on those third downs. Again, I'll say if you have Rodgers in there, he probably can get you out of certain situations where maybe that stuff don't happen, or they just don't blitz him because what's going to happen if you do. What was your take on Jordan Love and his debut, his first start?
I agree with you 100%. It's unfair to make any type of designation on his status with the organization and which direction they should move based on one start. Let's look at Justin Fields. We watched him play last night, right?
Mm-hmm.
Justin Fields, even though I think there are legitimate questions about how they're handling him, how they're setting him up essentially to fail in certain regards, at the end of that game, he moved his team 7 plays, 75 yards to what should have been the game-winning touchdown. And he's flashed potential. But if we rewind the tape a few weeks when he made his first start at Cleveland Browns, how atrocious was that effort, right?
Yeah.
47 total yards, the best or least Cleveland Browns have ever given up. Not recently, not since they came back to Cleveland. I'm talking ever, since 1946. That's how bad of an offensive performance that was for the Chicago Bears. Justin Fields had 1 passing yard in that game. 1, singular, 1 yard. And if we wrote off young quarterbacks, particularly first-round quarterbacks, after one start where everything doesn't go their way and they're still trying to figure things out and teams are specifically game planning to confuse them, most of these guys wouldn't make it beyond the first couple of weeks. And so I'm looking at it as this way. Was it possibly disappointing? Okay, that's fine. You can make that argument. But it doesn't change anything the Green Bay Packers should be planning in 2022 and beyond. This will be his team. They will move forward with him as a quarterback, and Aaron Rodgers will eventually be traded or released or retire, whatever decision is ultimately made. And they have to capitalize on what they can now, because that is upcoming, and they need to understand where they are as an organization overall.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to him, and I just saw that a lot. And, I made a joke on Twitter that said, about Rodgers and stuff about it. But, when you really think about it, it's just, like I said, tough situation for him. Made the Chiefs' defense look really good for 1 week, I guess. That was a positive on the Kansas City side of things.
Well, the thing with Aaron Rodgers is I have no problem with making any decisions. I have no problem with him looking for alternate choices if there's medical reasons, as he stated. That's all perfectly fine. The issue isn't with that. The issue is with accountability, not only as a teammate, as a leader, but also in the public eye. When you intentionally mislead people, that's where the anger and vitriol comes from. Not necessarily just because you decided against getting the vaccination shot, but how you handled it publicly. And so the fact that we have reports that he's all aghast about how people are treating him, why? People don't like liars, and that's essentially what he did. And so if you're all worried about how you're perceived, maybe next time tell the truth, even if it's not looked upon favorably. At least people can respect you for your decision.
Yeah, that's right. That's the thing. That's kind of what I've gathered from the whole situation as well. But it's going to be we're at, like you said, at midway point. The playoff races are going to be interesting all over the AFC, the NFC. I'm really looking forward to the second half of the season, Brent. And I always look forward to having you on the podcast. But if listeners want to follow you online and viewers, where can they find you?
Well, same old. I'm at Brent Sobleski, Sobleski, on Twitter. That's where I do most of my damage. Otherwise, you can check on the BR app or just BleacherReport.com. You can find my work there regularly. Right now, as we've discussed before, I'm taking more of a draft perspective this year, though I still have my normal NFL coverage responsibilities as well. So a little bit of both if you enjoy those things.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, Brent. Appreciate you coming on the show, and I look forward to talking again sometime down the road.
No, thank you for having me as always.